What are dynamic arrays, and how can they help make our programs even more awesome? As we've seen so far, the arrays that we create have a fixed size. We can declare that size in the code, but then that's it. It's got that size. It can't grow bigger or smaller. Dynamic arrays allow you to have an array inside which elements can be added and removed. C++ calls this the vector type, and we can use the vector to manage our dynamic arrays. What you want to do at the top of your file is include the vector namespace or the vector library and indicate that you want to use the vector class. To declare a variable then of this vector class, you do vector string followed by data. So vector is the name of the type. It's a class which is basically like an advanced struct. We can then indicate on that we want this to store a string. So each element inside the vector is a string, and our variable name is data. We can add new values to that then using data dot and pushback. So this is a case where we have a method. This method executes upon this value, and so we're pushing this value into that vector, so into that array. We also have a size function, and this is what's going to make it so much nicer. Now the vector knows its size, unlike the array which doesn't know its size. So it simplifies things. You just pass the vector around and you have everything you need to work with. You can then loop through that vector and process each element in exactly the same way as you would access the elements of an array. To remove an element, you can only remove from the end of a vector. We push them onto the back and we can pop them off. So pop them off is just remove it from the back. It deletes the last element. If you want to delete anything other than the last element, then you just need to copy that bit of data out of the last element to somewhere else in the array and then delete the last element. So in this case, we're saving whatever is in that last element into element 3, or the element at index 3, and then we delete that value. We can also use vectors as our parameters and return types. So our shortest name function could have a vector as a parameter. You would pass that like this. You can also do the same thing with, for example, the index of. We pass in, here's the list of names, but I want you to check this name in that list of names. So we have two parameters in that case. Create a task 6.2 now. And with this, you can just copy your code from task 6.1, and really all we need you to do is to switch that to using a vector instead of a standard array. Make a few changes. At the start, ask the user how many names they want to add to the array. Then you can add them one at a time by pushing them onto the back. Output the summary details, and then your program's finished. I've got a bit of a start here, so I'll show you what I did. For my program, I've started off by replacing the array with a vector of type string. One thing I have to do is make sure that we include the vector library. So we put in here using std : vector. Okay, we have access to that vector class now. Then what we can do is, well, we've renamed the array down here. We can add elements to the array dynamically using pushback. I've just put it in here 3 times. You need to ask the user for the number and then loop to repeat adding them that many times. We can access the size instead of using that size constant. So now I would say the name of the vector dot size open bracket close bracket. And that will execute that on this names variable, and it will tell me how many elements are currently in the vector, and I can print each of those out. Let's have a look at the contains function. The others have all been changed in the same way. We can replace the array with the vector here, remove the size parameter, and keep any other parameters that we need. Inside the loop, the only thing we need, or inside the body, the only thing we really need to change is the size that we were using here. Before this was just the size variable, whereas now I would access the size from the vector itself. So grab the vector and access the size element or the size method from that vector. With that, we can then go through and execute the same code that we had before. But the great thing is now we should be able to add and remove elements. So we could go ahead and create a menu in which the users can add and remove elements from the array. But for the moment, let's just get the basics working, and we can create a more complex program later on.